As the nation gears up for a lightning visit of the American president, we thought we'd get an update on American economic and political issues surrounding Barack Obama's trip, which included APEC and the upcoming East Asia Summit. Geoffrey Garrett is the founding CEO of the US Studies Centre and spoke with me earlier. Geoffrey Garrett, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've heard a lot over the last few days about this Trans-Pacific Partnership that President Obama has been pushing. It seems to me that it's very politically motivated, particularly concerning China.
I think that's exactly right, Ticky. You know, really TPP is about tying a bright red ribbon around a group of countries that are already connected with a lot of bilateral FTAs. So the pure economic benefits aren't as strong. I think the big message here is that President Obama and the US would like to build their own economic institution in the Asia Pacific, an economic institution that would have a lot of American allies in it, but also very large Chinese trading partners. So the proposition to China down the road would be, here's an institution you would probably like to join, but we're going to ask you to make some big domestic concessions to get it done. Float the currency, protect intellectual property, give us more market access. It's a pretty aggressive move, I think.
From an Australian point of view, we look at balancing relationships with the US and China because both are so important. What I didn't realise relatively at the moment, what are the investment figures in Australia?
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, everybody looks at booming Australian trade with China, and when they see the US, they think, boy, we don't do as much trade and we run a trade deficit. What Australians tend to overlook is just the massive scale of American investment in the country. I think at the figures at the end of 2010, the official figures were that US investment in Australia was running at about $550 billion. Total Chinese investment in Australia at the end of last year, $20 billion. So we're talking about, you know, a 25-fold magnitude difference there.
Things change very fast, of course. Can you see that rebalancing within the next 20 years, say?
It might take something like 20 years or longer. Obviously, Australians are going to have to come to grips with the notion that China's going to want to invest more in the country, and certainly Chinese investment has been growing very rapidly in Australia, but from a very low base. And the other thing I think that Australians probably wouldn't notice is that American investment figure has actually increased by about 1/3 in the last 5 years. You know, we're talking about a lot of money there.
Let's talk about President Obama and domestic politics, because what a time to be away. I note one journalist saying it's always better to be in Indiana than Indonesia, let alone Australia. How is he going to go in terms of the Super Committee and their report on November the 23rd?
Well, I think Obama is taking heat from the left and the right at the moment at home. You know, this trip is not going to be a win for him in the US. So the Republicans are saying, you are an irresponsible leader because we're only 1 week out from the Super Committee's report and you're choosing to spend it in the Asia Pacific. At exactly the same time, Democrats are saying those free trade deals you want to do, we call those job killers. What that tells me is that this Asia Pacific agenda is incredibly important to Obama, precisely because he's going to have to suffer some domestic political hits to further his foreign policy agenda.
What does Wall Street think of Barack Obama?
Wall Street doesn't like Barack Obama. You know, it's quite interesting. Barack Obama bailed out Wall Street and got a lot of criticism for it. But I think what people on Wall Street say is, listen, you know, you're telling us you want to tax us even more. We're already paying enormous amount in tax in the US. Give us a break. We're the engine for the US economy. So that's not a very good relationship. I think Obama actually does better in the corporate community outside New York than he does on Wall Street.
He's got a few other problems, hasn't he? He's got the jobs bill, which he's having great difficulty getting through, and his entire healthcare overhaul, which was such a big thing for him when he was campaigning last time around. That's now the subject of a Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, well, so the Supreme Court has said that they're going to review it officially, and we expect the ruling to happen in the middle of next year. You know,
but that's very bad timing in the lead up to the November election next year.
Bad or good timing? You know, the Supreme Court is an independent institution, runs to the beat of its own drum. If you were predicting today, I think the tea leaves say that in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court will probably rule important elements of Obama's healthcare legislation unconstitutional. You'd think that would be a devastating blow to Obama, but it might give him the chance to say, to run again outside Washington. I'm running against those Republicans who are blocking things like my jobs bill. I'm now going to run against the Supreme Court, which is blocking my healthcare reform.
Finally, a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Charles Dumas, who's chairman of Lombard Street Research. He's very strong about the American phoenix rising in the long term and China and Europe struggling. You're a supporter of this theory too, aren't you?
Yeah, I think in Australia at the moment, the understandable temptation is to overestimate China and underestimate the US. But in the medium term, the fundamentals of the US look pretty good. Its demographics are much better than Europe's. Its welfare state problems aren't nearly as big, and it remains an extraordinarily innovative economy. Contrast that with China. Looks great today, but it's going to be old before it's rich. It's got massive environmental problems, and of course, the social tensions as the middle class rises and demands more political power, those are only going to increase as well. So maybe if we take a 5 to 10 year perspective, there's going to be a big re-equilibration in the global balance of power.
Geoff Garrett, I always have too many questions for you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Ticky.